Imagine paying half a day's wages, just to stand in a muddy tent in upstate New York.
Right, staring down into a literal dirt pit.
Exactly. And you're staring at the petrified corpse of a 10-foot-tall biblical giant. I mean, in 1869, thousands of people actually did exactly that.
Because it's so wild to think about.
It really is. So today we are looking at how a 3,000-pound fake rock absolutely broke the brains of, both the religious establishment and the scientific community.
Yeah.
And we are jumping into a deep dive on a fascinating historical excerpt about America's most famous fake giant.
Yeah, it is a story that reveals so much about the mechanics of a viral sensation. And this is decades before the internet even existed.
Oh, for sure.
And it pulls in some of the most colorful characters of the 19th century, including the massive circus empire of P.T. Barnum.
So to really understand the scale of this, you have to picture the scene. It's October 1869 in a field near Cardiff, New York.
Right.
This is a super rural spot just south of the Adirondacks. But it is not a quiet farm day at all.
No, not even close.
There are massive crowds of people. You've got gentlemen in fine top hats, women in heavy, long 1860s dresses, and they are all trudging through the mud.
Just ruining their clothes, honestly.
Seriously. And they're queuing up to hand over 25 or 50 cents, which, that was significant money back then.
Oh, yeah. It's essentially the equivalent of a modern movie ticket or even more.
Exactly. And all just to enter this sprawling canvas tent.
And the marketing hanging outside that tent was so aggressive. Like there was this massive hand-painted banner practically screaming at the crowd.
Oh, I love 19th century marketing.
It's the best. The banner read, Cardiff Giant, genuine original, taller than Goliath whom David slew.
Wow. They really went for it.
They did. And it listed the exact dimensions, too. 10 feet, 4.5 inches tall, weighing 2,990 pounds.
That is suspiciously specific.
Right. And it even boldly claimed that P.T. Barnum had offered $150,000 to buy it.
Which was just an astronomical, generation-defining amount of wealth at the time.
Unimaginable money.
It's the ultimate fear of missing out marketing. You read that banner and think, well, if Barnum wants it that badly, I have to see what is inside this tent.
Yeah, you're paying your 50 cents immediately.
And when you finally get inside, there it is. A colossal, incredibly detailed stone figure of a man, seemingly frozen in agony, half buried in the earth.
Just a crazy sight.
The inciting incident for this whole frenzy actually happened when two well diggers who were working on a farm owned by William Stubb Newell hit something hard in the dirt. They kept digging, and up comes this massive anomaly. But, let's lay our cards on the table right out of the gate here.
Yeah, let's just spoil it.
This world-shaking artifact, the thing everyone was throwing their money at, it was a complete fabrication, 100% fake.
The entire thing was just a beautifully engineered illusion.
Right.
But a fake is only as successful as the audience's willingness to believe it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So before we get into the actual physical mechanics of how this thing was made, we really have to look at the environment that allowed it to thrive in the first place.
Because the reaction was just explosive.
Right.
Word spread from that farm in Cardiff, and within days, newspapers across the country were running these front-page breathless stories.
It was an era where news moved fast via telegraph, but facts moved very, very slowly.
Yeah, that is a great way to put it.
And what happened in Cardiff was fascinating. You had visiting scientists and academics coming down to examine this 10-foot stone figure.
Real scientists.
Real academics. And some of them formally declared it was a petrified man from ancient times.
Which sounds crazy to us now.
It does. But you have to remember, early paleontology and geology were still in their relative infancy.
Right.
There was a very real, scientifically debated belief at the time that human flesh could literally turn to stone under the right chemical conditions in the earth.
But then you look across the tent and you have an entirely different camp looking at the exact same giant.
Exactly. You had religious leaders, theologians, and these faithful crowds who looked down into that pit and saw undeniable physical proof of the giants mentioned in the book of Genesis.
They saw pure theological validation pulled straight from the upstate New York soil.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because how does one single object do this? It feels exactly like a 19th century version of a viral Twitter debate.
Oh, it really does.
Like an image drops online and immediately half the internet uses it to definitively prove their worldview, and the other half uses the exact same image to prove the total opposite.
Yep.
How did a literal giant rock perfectly split the difference between scientific curiosity and religious validation?
What's fascinating here is how the timing of this hoax perfectly exploited the deep psychological vulnerabilities of the era.
How so?
Well, you have to remember what was happening in 1869. The country was still reeling from the mass trauma and grief of the Civil War.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right, which sparked this massive surge in spiritualism. People desperately wanted to connect with the divine or the afterlife because they had lost so many loved ones.
Right. The mourning culture was huge.
Exactly. And at the exact same time, Charles Darwin had just published On the Origin of Species in 1859.
Wow. So the scientific foundation of the world is basically shifting underneath them, while the religious foundation is just desperately trying to hold its ground.
It was a massive intellectual upheaval. Traditional biblical literalism was being aggressively challenged by new scientific theories.
Right.
The public just had a deep, unquenchable thirst for answers. And when people are navigating that kind of existential anxiety, they become highly susceptible to confirmation bias.
They weren't looking for objective truth at all. They were looking for an anchor.
Exactly. If you were a scientist looking to make your name on a grand geological discovery, you saw petrification.
And if you were feeling threatened by the creeping secularism of the modern world, you saw Goliath.
The stone itself was really just a blank canvas. It was reflecting whatever the viewer desperately wanted to be true.
But a cultural phenomenon like this doesn't just, carve itself out of the bedrock.
No, definitely not.
The fact that this stone perfectly weaponized 1860s cultural anxieties, it wasn't a lucky coincidence. It was a highly targeted piece of art made by a guy holding a massive grudge.
Yeah, the mastermind behind the Cardiff Giant was a man named George Hull.
Okay.
And he wasn't a master sculptor, he wasn't an evil genius, and he certainly wasn't an archaeologist.
Oh, who was he?
He was a cigar maker from the Binghamton area.
Wait, a cigar maker. We go from Darwin and biblical literalism to a guy rolling tobacco in Binghamton.
It is a jarring pivot, I know. But it all started with a fiery argument.
Like most things do.
True. So Hull, who was a staunch skeptic and an atheist, got into a heated debate with a preacher at a Methodist revival meeting.
Okay, I can see where this is going.
The topic was Genesis 6:4, which states that there were giants in the earth in those days.
And Hull wasn't having it.
Not at all. Hull thought the literal interpretation was ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the preacher defended the text verbatim.
Right.
Hull left that argument incredibly frustrated by the blind faith of the believers, and he essentially decided to prove a point about human gullibility.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because I am honestly struggling to buy George Hull's motive here.
How so?
Well, you don't spend a fortune carving a 3,000-pound statue, invent acid aging techniques, and wait a full year just to win a petty bar argument with a preacher.
It's a fair point.
At what point did this cross the line from a theological grudge into a highly calculated financial scam?
The financial motive undoubtedly hijacked the intellectual grudge very early on.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Hull realized that if people were willing to believe in giants blindly, they would certainly pay to see one.
Absolutely.
But executing this required a staggering level of commitment. He couldn't just carve a clean statue. He needed to deliver a masterclass in 19th century special effects.
So how do you even fake a 3,000-pound ancient corpse in the 1860s?
First, you need the right material. So Hull traveled to a stone yard in Chicago and procured a massive 10-foot block of raw gypsum.
Why gypsum specifically?
Gypsum is crucial here because it is incredibly heavy, giving it the physical gravity of a real fossil. But it's a soft sulfate mineral, which makes it relatively easy to carve.
Oh, that's smart.
Right. So he hired stone cutters, swore them all to secrecy, and has him carve the likeness of a giant man in agony.
But a freshly carved piece of gypsum just looks like a freshly carved piece of gypsum. It doesn't look ancient.
Which is where Hull's dark brilliance really comes in. He spent weeks painstakingly weathering the stone.
How?
He bathed the giant in sulfuric acid to erode the surface. This made it look aged and beaten by millennia in the earth.
Wow.
Then he took wooden blocks, hammered heavy darning needles into them, and used a mallet to pound those needle blocks all over the statue's surface.
But why needles?
To simulate human skin pores.
Oh my God. That is intensely methodical.
It was a flawless simulation of petrified flesh.
Wow.
Once he had this perfectly aged fake, he had to get it from Chicago to upstate New York.
Which is not easy with a giant rock.
Not at all. He hid the 3,000-pound giant inside a massive reinforced crate labeled farm machinery.
Just to avoid drawing a crowd of onlookers at the rail yards, right?
Exactly. He shipped it by train, transported it by wagon to his cousin William Newell's farm, and they buried it in the dead of night.
And then he just walks away. He literally leaves it in the ground for almost a year.
He had to let the earth settle. If the soil looked freshly turned, the visiting scientists would know it was a recent burial.
That is just incredible patience.
It really is. So after a year, he instructed Newell to hire 2 well diggers to dig in that exact spot.
And the trap snapped shut perfectly.
Perfectly. The frenzy began, the 50-cent admission started rolling in, and Hull and his cousin quickly sold their giant to a syndicate of local businessmen.
For how much?
$23,000.
$23,000 in 1869 is easily the equivalent of $500,000 today.
Yep.
Hull essentially crowdfunded a fortune off of his own spite.
Pretty much.
But a $23,000 payout in the 19th century entertainment business is like blood in the water. It inevitably draws the ultimate shark.
P.T. Barnum.
Yes.
This is where the story shifts into an amazing clash of the con men.
Barnum sees the lines of people in Cardiff, he sees the newspaper headlines, and he wants in.
Naturally.
So he legitimately offers $50,000 to buy the giant from the syndicate. And remember that banner we mentioned at the start?
The one claiming he offered $150,000.
Exactly. The owners exaggerated Barnum's offer to $150,000 for pure marketing hype. They were using his famous name to validate their fake.
Which is bold. But the syndicate made a fatal error here.
They got greedy.
They did. They refused Barnum's actual $50,000 offer. They thought they had a monopoly on the giant business, and they just weren't going to sell.
So Barnum executes what has to be the most ruthless business pivot in entertainment history.
Oh, it's brutal.
He just hires a sculptor to secretly create a plaster copy of the giant overnote.
He bootlegs the hoax?
It is literally the 1860s equivalent of pirating a movie.
Yes.
Barnum takes his hastily made plaster copy, puts it on display in New York City, charges his own admission, and loudly proclaims to the press that his plaster copy is the actual original giant.
And that the one up in Cardiff is a cheap fake.
Exactly. So now, there are 2 competing giants touring the country. Both of them are raking in cash, and both of them are completely fake.
It's hilarious.
But how does Barnum boldly steal another man's fraud without facing any legal consequences?
This raises an important question about the intellectual property of a lie. Legally speaking, you cannot copyright a hoax.
Oh, of course.
The syndicate couldn't walk into a courtroom and say, "Your Honor, P.T. Barnum stole the fake ancient giant that we are currently using to defraud the American public."
They'd be implicating themselves.
Exactly. Barnum understood a fundamental truth that George Hull just missed. Barnum realized the true product wasn't the gypsum, and it wasn't the plaster.
The product was the story.
Exactly. The story and the spectacle.
And no one on earth distributed a story better than P.T. Barnum. He didn't just make a copy. He possessed an infrastructural empire that the Upstate syndicate couldn't even comprehend.
To really understand how Barnum crushed the original hoaxers, you have to look at the logistics of the greatest show on earth.
It wasn't just a guy pitching a tent.
No, Barnum was operating a traveling city. Moving his circus meant moving elephants, giraffes, lions, massive canvas tents, seating, and hundreds of performers.
It required military-level logistics.
Absolutely.
Picture this. You wake up in a quiet 19th century coastal town. You walk down to the harbor with your morning coffee.
It's a normal morning.
Right. But giraffes and elephants are casually strolling off a massive ferry boat onto the local docks.
Just a wild thing to see.
Barnum's home base was in Bridgeport, Connecticut. When he needed to move his massive show into New York City or upstate, he used the waterways. He loaded everything onto ferries, crossed the Long Island Sound straight to Port Jefferson, New York, and then transferred it all directly onto the expanding rail network.
It was incredibly efficient.
It's essentially a 19th century version of Amazon Prime's supply chain.
Yes.
Except instead of moving cardboard boxes, this logistics network is moving apex predators and plaster giants. The operation was so heavy that Port Jefferson actually still has streets named after Barnum today.
Wow. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see exactly why Barnum won the giant war.
The logistics.
Exactly. The Upstate syndicate was struggling to figure out how to slowly haul a fragile 3,000-pound rock from town to town on muddy wagons.
Which takes forever.
Right. Meanwhile, Barnum took his lightweight plaster fake, plugged it directly into his highly efficient ferry and train infrastructure, and just relentlessly blanketed the Northeast.
He outdistributed the original hoaxers through sheer logistical supremacy.
He really did.
So you have two giants touring, but eventually the gig has to go up. In December of 1869, George Hull actually confessed to the entire scheme.
The whole thing.
Yeah, he explained the gypsum, the needles, the acid. The whole thing was blown wide open, and both versions of the giant were definitively proven to be fakes in court.
And here is the ultimate punchline of the entire saga.
Let's hear it.
The creator confesses, the court rules it a fraud, the newspapers print the undeniable truth, and the crowds.
Yeah.
They just kept coming.
They kept paying.
They kept paying.
So what does this all mean? Why would a rational person still hand over 50 cents after the creator explicitly admits it is a lie and a judge legally rules it a fraud? What are they even paying for at that point?
It is a brilliant shift in human psychology. When the truth came out, the nature of the entertainment simply evolved.
How do you mean?
Well, before the confession, the public was paying to witness a biblical miracle or a scientific marvel. But after the confession, they transitioned to paying to witness a masterclass in deception.
They wanted to marvel at the audacity of the con itself.
Exactly. Think about professional wrestling or like a massive Las Vegas magic show today.
Okay.
We know the wrestling match is choreographed. We know the magician isn't actually sawing a person in half.
Right, of course.
But we gladly pay for the ticket because we want to appreciate the craft of the illusion. We want to see how well they can pull it off.
That makes total sense.
In 1869, people wanted to look at the giant and try to spot the chisel marks. They wanted to see the pores made by the darning needles.
They just want to be in on the joke.
Exactly.
It taps into the exact same psychological itch that drives us to binge watch hours of documentaries about scammers, con artists, and failed music festivals today.
Yes, exactly.
We aren't watching because we believe the scam. The mechanics of the deception are inherently fascinating to us.
Barnum and Hull essentially delivered a true crime, scam documentary experience in a 19th century tent.
That is such a great way to frame it.
They provided the narrative of the century, and the public was more than happy to fund it.
And the most amazing part is that this 19th century spirit of wild claims and bigger-than-life characters hasn't faded at all.
Not even a little bit.
If you ever take a road trip through central New York, maybe you're staying at the Alpine Homestead and looking for an afternoon detour Cardiff, is an easy stop. The original giant George Hull's 3,000-pound spite project is actually still fully intact and on display today at the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown.
Over 150 years later, and it is still drawing a crowd.
It really proves that Barnum was entirely correct. The physical object is secondary. The story is what endures.
It really does. Spectacle, belief, and the willingness to embrace the impossible really are permanently ingrained in our culture.
They absolutely are.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on that very idea of our willingness to believe.
Let's hear it.
Think about those crowds in 1869. If an educated public back then could be so completely enthralled by a 3,000-pound fake rock, simply because it validated their pre-existing beliefs or thoroughly entertained them, what modern Cardiff giants are we blindly paying our own 50 cents to see in our digital news feeds today?
Wow.
Just because we so desperately want them to be true.
That is a great point. Are we actually looking at facts, or are we just staring into a pit at a rock that perfectly reflects our own biases?
Something to think about.
Truly. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We love unpacking the hidden stories that shape how we view the world. Until next time, keep questioning what you see, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take care.